Welcome to the Cova Tembel podcast, global news and personal views, hosted by your new friend, Yaron. Fasten your headphones. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Hello everyone, my name is Yaron and welcome to the Cova Tembel podcast. I am here to discuss issues that are on my mind. This is the 11th episode of the Cova Tembel podcast and I really thank you for coming and taking the time from your busy schedule to listen. If you're new here, thank you very much, and if you're coming back, thank you too. As you may have noticed, every intro and outro is different every episode with the help of AI music on Canva. Let's dive in. This episode's topic, the Gaza hostage situation, and on the world news, the scandalous UN Security Council meeting on Gaza Ceasefire deal, part 2, the continuation from the last week's episode. On the DJ corner, the Cova Tembel music song called Just Hold On to All What God Has Blessed. And this week in history and a silly parting joke. First, I'd like to send prayers to those affected by the LA fires. The devastation is so great, and I'm looking at the photos and images and videos that are coming out, and I hope they rebuild that part of LA soon and heal their lives. The hostage situation update. Now 96 children, women and men are still being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas and other terrorist organizations. This past week, the bodies of 4 hostages were retrieved from Gaza: Yosef al-Ziadna and his son Hamza al-Ziadna, and Dikla Arava and her son Tomer. Negotiations are still ongoing, and let's hope and pray that a breakthrough will happen very soon. Hopefully this time our prayers will be answered. In world news, now I'm gonna again cover only one issue on this episode, and that's the scandalous UN Security Council meeting on Gaza Ceasefire deal, Israel versus Palestine conflict. I will leave the link to that UN Security Council meeting below. On January 23rd, the UN Security Council met on the topic of the war going on and still going on, focusing on the Gazan medical infrastructure and personnel being targeted by Israel. Now, many of them spoke generally about war crimes and international law, and inserted the name of Israel just to make sure who they mean is the one responsible, but without actually coming out and saying so. Now, in the previous episode, I reacted to Mr. Volker Turk's report. Mr. Volker is the current head of the Human Rights Council. And in this episode, I will review and discuss the quote-unquote review by Dr. Rick Peppercorn. He is the WHO representative for Gaza, and he gives a review of the health situation in Gaza. First of all, Dr. Peppercorn travels to Gaza every couple of months and stays there a few weeks, so he says, which shows that foreign representatives are allowed into Gaza and leave Gaza. So this debunks the idea that Israel doesn't allow movement in and out of Gaza by foreign representatives. Dr. Peppercorn insists on calling Gaza an occupied territory, knowing well that Hamas has occupied Gaza since 2005. So I'll quote Dr. Peppercorn's words and then give my short opinion about his words. He begins by saying, 2025 begins on a somber and deeply worrying note as fighting continues to intensify and hope dwindles for Gazans who have been enduring this nightmare for 14 months. Notice how he hasn't mentioned the nightmare Israelis have been going through in the past 14 months, or in the past 20 years, and in the past 77 years. He goes on to say, approximately 7% of the population has been killed or injured since October 2023. Now that is tragic, but he doesn't mention Hamas's involvement in this tragedy. Now, he says October 7th, 2023. He says October 2023. He leaves out the number 7, the date. Now, this occurs a few times during his review that ignores the root cause of the crisis. By not saying October 7, the WHO's, to me, it seems that the WHO's ignorance of the issue is putting a band-aid on a heart attack. Now, I'm not sure if it's deliberate, but it is definitely incompetent behavior by an organization that says it is dedicated to the well-being of all people and guided by science. The world, this is from their website, I'll repeat it. Dedicated to the well-being of all people and guided by science, the World Health Organization leads and champions global efforts to give everyone, everywhere, an equal chance to live a healthy life. In their website, the WHO Constitution states as follows: the health of all peoples is fundamental to the attainment of peace and security and is dependent on the fullest cooperation of individuals and states. And so, in his review, I believe Dr. Peppercorn completely ignores the needs of the health of the hostages. He does not even mention them once. He goes on to say, for over 25% or more of more than 105,000 people suffering from life-changing injuries. And by the way, in his entire review, Dr. Peppercorn does not once mention the life-changing injuries suffered by thousands of Israelis and many foreign nationals on October 7th and on. He goes on to say, which will need extensive rehabilitation and lifelong medical assistance technologies, according to WHO report estimates. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it seems that the WHO, I'm going to call it WHO from now on, they're gearing up, it seems to me, gearing up to ask for money from the international community. He goes on to say, time and time again, hospitals have become battlegrounds, rendering them out of service and deprive those in need of life-saving care. And I don't understand why Dr. Peppercorn does not admit, or maybe he doesn't admit it to himself, but keeps it away from the forum due to maybe perhaps a fear of retaliation, that Hamas has made these hospitals into battlegrounds by storing ammunition digging tunnels under them and placing military installations next to them. It seems that, now this is my opinion of course, but it seems to me that keeping your job at WHO means that having to outwardly at least sit on the fence even when there is an evidence of wrongdoing by one side. And when I say wrongdoing, I mean terror in the most brutal way, with the intentions of genocide by Hamas and other terrorist groups, as it is written in the Hamas covenant. For example, the preamble of the covenant, the Hamas covenant, states, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. And in Article 7 it states that the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, "Oh Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." So, Dr. Peppercorn doesn't seem to point that out as a part of the root cause of what Gaza is going through in terms of healthcare, of the crisis in healthcare. Now, to be fair to WHO, the organization on its website stated that, and I quote, WHO has called for the immediate and unconditional release and safe return of over 200 hostages held in Gaza. Now that's an old one, and they haven't yet updated their website, which tells you something. Now, there is an article also on the WHO website, and I will leave that link below. It says, conflict in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory and region. This is the title of the article. I'll read it again. Conflict in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory and region. Now, this is a misleading article titled, "There is no conflict in Israel. The conflict is with Hamas, who is the occupier of the Palestinian territory of Gaza." But on this page, they also make a strange statement. Quote, "In Israel, over 100 civilians, including children and the elderly, are still being held hostage." Now, this could be a typo, but it does show their lack of attention to this matter. And I wrote to the WHO with a request to amend this error, and I'll update you if I hear back from them. It's also strange to me that WHO calls Gaza an occupied Palestinian territory over and over again, since they know that Hamas is leading that territory since 2005. So if they mean that the occupied Palestinian territory is occupied by Hamas, then yes, they are right. But I don't think that's what they're talking about. So he goes on to say in his review, the infrastructure has been systematically dismantled and pushed to the breaking point. Its resilience tested amid dire shortages of medical supplies, equipment, and specialized staff. Now, if I may speak with a medical metaphor, I think Dr. Peppercorn should praise the Israeli quote-unquote medical operation by using specialized staff, the IDF in Gaza regions, held by the cancerous cells that is Hamas, and confine that deadly cancerous growth. Maybe it's not a great metaphor, but I think it's effective. He says only 16 of the 36 hospitals in Gaza remain partially functional. For those of you who don't know, Israel helped build some of these hospitals back in the day when there were relatively normal relations with Gazans before they voted Hamas into power. Now, also, I just want to say that some of the things I'm reading from my notes because I really don't want to make any mistakes. Now, he goes on to say, Dr. Peppercorn, that with a total bed capacity of 1,822, far below what is needed to address the overwhelming health crisis due to damage, attacks, and shortages, most hospitals can only provide basic care and lack the capacity for specialized treatment of chronic diseases. Now, in my opinion, the main chronic disease is the non-recognition of the State of Israel and the constant hate speech directed at Israelis. That's the real chronic disease. He goes on to say, and complex injuries leading to increased suffering and death. Despite these challenges, the pace of medical evacuations remain extremely slow since October 2023. And here again, he conveniently omits the saying October 7th. And that's a psychological trick he's playing. Only 5,383 patients have been evacuated abroad for medical treatment, with support from WHO and its partners. Of these, only 436 have been evacuated since the closure of the Rafah crossing of 6th of May 2024. And he's saying that over 12,000 people still require medical evacuation, and at the current rate, it would take 5 to 10 years to evacuate all these critically ill patients. Now, I say that at the current rate, how long will it take to release all the hostages? Dr. Peppercorn skips over the health and well-being of the hostages in this obviously biased quote-unquote review of the situation. Now, I believe that the WHO's soft-handed criticism of the root cause of the problem and overlooking the hostage crisis as part of the overall health crisis in Gaza just seems to me to show where Dr. Peppercorn's loyalty lies. I believe personally that his loyalty lies in his fear of backlash if he does not set the record straight. Now, as a doctor, he should be mindful of the root cause of a disease, point it out, and make every attempt to remove the cause and not the symptom. And I can't say that I'm surprised that people like Dr. Peppercorn are hired to head the WHO and such organizations, because it's like those I see it like it's like the professors at some at some of those U.S. universities and colleges that are hired for their biases. Anyway, he goes on to say, including thousands of children, despite this challenging environment, WHO and its partners are doing all they can to keep hospitals and health service operational. However, our ability to move aid has severely has been severely compromised, has severely compromised the entry of supplies into and across Gaza. Now, so Dr. Peppercorn is not saying who is compromising the movement across Gaza, and this is, in my opinion, more fence-sitting by WHO, which is a part of the reason the conflicts and the resulting healthcare crises in the Middle East and around the world continue to happen. If your doctor keeps telling you to keep taking pills to feel better, but does not advise you to change your habits, then that doctor is not really contributing to your well-being. And that's in my opinion, how the WHO is trying to heal the world, which is not an effective way, in my opinion. He goes on to say, it remains extremely low, so low due to restrictions and delays in the clearance of supplies entering the Strip and obstacles to our missions in Gaza. So which obstacle is he talking about? Again, he's being general and sort of foggy in order to keep the whole thing vague and not make a statement that could hurt him personally. As far as his job is concerned. So that's how I feel. It just seems that this whole fence sitting at the UN is just counterproductive. He says in 2024 alone, only 111 out of 279 WHO missions were facilitated directly impacting our ability to safely and promptly resupply hospitals, to transfer critical patients and deploy medical emergency teams since October 2023. Now, again, he fails to report who caused this state of non-safety in the first place. And by saying October 2023, he's again and not saying the date, October 7th, and I think it's because he knows the meaning of that date and what feelings and emotions and images come up. And if he says October 7th, he will, in a way, bring up who actually perpetrated the massacre and on whom. In that particular forum at the UN Security Council, it seems to me that Dr. Peppercorn is dancing around the massacre in order to either to keep his job or to maintain a bias against Israel in that forum that is mostly against Israel, as evident by their voting records. So he goes on to say, almost every week, WHO has repeatedly issued urgent calls to protect workers and hospitals as per international humanitarian law, yet these calls remain unheard. Attacks on hospitals persist to date and has verified 654 attacks on healthcare facilities in Gaza, resulting in 886 fatalities and 349 injuries in North Gaza. And it made me think and ask if Dr. Peppercorn ever counted the number of rockets Hamas shot at Israel, including and mostly towards civilian targets, and has he called at any UN Security Council meetings to protect Israeli health workers, hospitals, as per international humanitarian law. So I see kind of a two-faced approach to the whole thing. They cherry pick their data to create a narrative. It goes on to say, which has been under siege for approximately 90 days, and the health and humanitarian situations continue to deteriorate at the Alada hospital. It remains minimal function, and there is no primary healthcare facilities available in the area. So he's talking about mainly the Gazan really tragic consequences to Gazans and their fatalities and injuries. But did he ask himself, are the hostages receiving health care in accordance with international humanitarian law? And I ask, has Dr. Peppercorn, when he visits Gaza, ever publicly and vocally, out loud, or even in an official statement specific to the situation, has he called on the Palestinians to release the hostages in accordance with international humanitarian law while he is in Gaza? Does he dare speak in this manner? And why is he not doing it in this forum? Aren't the hostages under the care of Gazan medical staff? Now he goes on to say, still in the area of Kamal at one hospital, the main hospital in North Gaza, was put out of services following a raid last week's relentless attacks. Now, he keeps saying attacks as if they're not retaliatory strikes at Hamas terror. These are just accusations that are quite outrageous, and only it just perpetuates the injustice, I think. He reframes the situation one way and incompletely, just part of the story. He goes on to say, since October of this year, that's since October, WHO was constantly hindered in accessing the hospital during this period, with only 10 out of 21 missions partially facilitated on December 7th. Now, apparently the hospital was empty, and the majority of the Indonesian hospital was non-functional. And we also talked about Dr. Hama Abu Safia, which is the director of the Kamal Hospital, who was detained during the war, and they've lost contact with him. Anyway, since this UN Security Council meeting, the doctor has been in contact with CNN too, so he's doing all right. Now, he goes on to say, WHO and partners' efforts over the last month to sustain the hospital's operations have been undone. We call for urgent access to the hospital to assess the damage and determine if it can be restored. And I'm calling for the urgent release of all hostages so that they can receive their care and restore their dignity. And I'm asking myself, why doesn't he have the courage to call for access to the hostages right there at the meeting? There's got to be a reason. He goes on to say, food and water and fuel are depleting fast, and the hospital has been without many essential medicines for more than 85 days. Access to the hospital is dangerous for patients in need due to the hostilities nearby, and still no mention of the hostages and the lack of essential medicines they're not getting. Now, so he keeps talking about the health crisis in Gaza, and I understand him. It's a travesty. It's a tragedy. But he has not yet put the blame, if you can call it blame, or you know what, just call it responsibility, on Hamas. Not even one word on that, and I think that's curious. Anyway, he goes on to say that a hospital following severe attacks and destruction earlier this year are prime examples of the resilience of a Gaza health system. Well, to that I say that they wouldn't have to have resilience if Hamas didn't massacre babies, women, and the elderly, and even some animals. And then making the Gazans suffer the consequences of their actions. So, and Dr. Peppercorn just keeps, talking around the issue, and really is putting on a band-aid on a heart attack. He thinks he's being smart with all this data, and he seems to be saying that he cares, but I from what he's saying, it doesn't seem like it to me. He goes on to say, and the inspiring dedication of its health workers with the support of WHO and its partners, this is nothing short of a feat. Now, this is quite a farcical statement. Dr. Peppercorn seems to be indirectly praising Gazans for the October 7th massacre. His feeling, and I have to say that his feelings for their dedication, calling it a feat, is ridiculous. Now, I understand that he's feeling sorry for Gazans, and that's understandable. Really, it is understandable. But they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they think they're being kind of smart, but they caused their own demise. Now, so he's feeling sorry for the Gazans, and that's understandable. But he doesn't state against what backdrop should their dedication be called a feat. The backdrop is the October 7th massacre that was initiated from Gaza. It's also ridiculous. Uh, and I know that he's a smart man, so I know he's not stupid when he's talking about the issue, so he's got to be spoken from his own bias. Now, he goes on to say, okay, nothing short of a feat, and is a reason to be hopeful. It shows what can be achieved if healthcare is protected and peace is given a chance. I want to remind that hospitals have a special protection under international humanitarian law. And I say, so do babies and women and the elderly and the teens who are celebrating life in music festivals. But Dr. Peppercorn doesn't mention their rights. And that's what the WHO is actually, presenting forward to the world. And that's disturbing to me. Because of their life-saving functions, he goes on to say, while hospitals may, under specific and limited circumstances, lose their protected status, such use does not absolve any party from its obligations to comply with all other relevant rules of international humanitarian law. Now, not once did Peppercorn mention Hamas's responsibility in creating this humanitarian and health crisis in Gaza. And again, he seems to be trying to treat the symptoms and not the root cause, which in my opinion is the non-recognition of the state of Israel by most Gazans and other so-called Palestinians. Now, so it seems that, I don't know, Dr. Peppercorn is either trying to keep his job or is truly biased against Israel. He is definitely not equal in his review. And now, all he's saying to me that it is quite transparent. He's hinting that Israel is not using precautions and proportionality. Now, Dr. Peppercorn, I believe, knows that Israel's actions are in keeping with international humanitarian law. Dr. Peppercorn is showing his bias against Israel by making it seem otherwise, because he says, like I said, that such use does not absolve any party from its obligations to comply with all other relevant rules of international humanitarian law that are applicable when launching attacks on military objectives, including the principle of distinction, precautions in attack, and proportionality. This remains fully applicable. And Peppercorn is definitely showing his bias against Israel by making it seem otherwise. He's playing with words, and that's a sick tactic, and I have to tell you, it's unhealthy to the well-being of the achievement of peace. And I'm saying it clearly. I think that the WHO is obstructing the way to peace. Alright, he goes on to say, lastly, I once again repeat WHO's call to ensure urgently that hospitals in the north of Gaza can be supported to become functional again for an expedited pace of medical evacuation and use all corridors from Gaza to get patients out, and including to the West Bank and East Jerusalem, for sustained access to hospitals, for increased flow of aid and information across and goods from Gaza, and for an urgent, lasting ceasefire. So Peppercorn conveniently forgets that there was a ceasefire before October 7th, which Hamas did not maintain and brought the entire Middle East into crisis. Now, the WHO Constitution also states, and I quote, "Informed opinion and active cooperation on the part of the public are of the utmost importance in the improvement of the health of the people." Now, in his entire so-called review, not once did Peppercorn even mention the hostages that require health care and humanitarian assistance from WHO and its partners. And it seems that to me that Peppercorn did not even mention once whether he contacted Hamas and Hamas supporters to receive their cooperation in returning the hostages, or even simply keeping their health and well-being a priority. It seems that the WHO is a sick entity, which is the one requiring medical assistance as a dying organization. Well, those are my thoughts about that. I'll continue next week with more about that. What are your thoughts and feelings about this? Please let me know in the comments. Alright, let's get to the DJ corner. This Cova Tembel music song is entitled "Just Hold On to All What God Has Blessed." This is another special song that I think you like. The Hebrew lyrics were written by the great Shimon Gelbetz, who also composed the music. The singer is the very talented Nashville musical artist Les Ford, who also plays all the live instruments. And I am dedicating this song to all those affected by the LA fires. I hope that you rebuild your life and make it a better one than before even.
It's in your nature, yours to recall when you got faith and you believe, or you can hide it all, get straight to heaven. Get right for the start, you have a hope inside your soul, a love that's in your heart. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Flames and water, a new dawn will rise, 'cause at the gates you said in heaven, truth shines in your eyes, there is no other. The fruit has been had, it's what you think that makes you grow back, good or bad. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. God has blessed you with pride and love. God has blessed you with skies above. God has blessed you with all you dream of. God has blessed you with wings of the dove. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. This is the nation, yours to recall when you got faith and you believe, or you can have it all, get straight to heaven. Get right for the start when you got hope inside your soul. Love is in your heart. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned. Yes, 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 yes. Just hold on to all what God has planned.
Good, so I hope you enjoyed the musical break. I will leave the link to the song below. If you like the content of the Cova Tembel podcast, please hit the like button, comment and share, and do subscribe. It would really help me a lot to promote this channel. And as usual, you might want to tell all your friends about the world's best new podcast, and then tell them about this one too. Now, let's move on to This Week in History.
This Week in History.
This Week in History, January 11th, 1775, Francis Salvador becomes the first Jew elected to office in the United States, in South Carolina. January 12th, 1977, anti-French demonstrations take place in Israel after Paris released Abu Daoud, the Palestinian terrorist responsible for the 1972 Munich massacre of Israeli athletes. January 13th, 1976, American inventor Ray Kurzweil and the National Federation of the Blind unveiled the Kurzweil reading machine, the first omni-font optical character recognition system. January 14th, 1129, formal approval of the Order of Templars at the Council of Troyes. I believe the leader of the order was named Simon and went on to have a successful TV show in the UK. January 15th, 1973, Pope Paul VI holds an audience with Israel Prime Minister Golda Meir at the Vatican, where they served kosher lox and bagels. January 16th, 1950, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands recognize Israel. Better late than never. January 17, 1946, the United Nations Security Council holds its first meeting at Westminster Central Hall in Westminster, England.
Oh, really?
Alright, so you've all been waiting for this, I know. This is the, by the way, This Week in History is from onthisday.com, and the silly parting joke is from rd.com. So here is what you've been waiting for all week. Now, okay, How do spiders get married? They have a webbing. Alright, well, I keep warning you. So, and you still come back, so I thank you for that. Okay, Home Planet listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. See you all again next week with more topics that I hope you'll find fascinating. Let me know in the comments if there are any issues you'd like me to discuss in the future. So until next time, take care of yourselves, be kind to one another, and defend the dignity of all living beings.
You have just listened to the Cova Tembel podcast. Yeah, it could have been better. But what can you do? Win some, lose some.
What are you still doing here?